Zone, your horror channel. Hello, good evening everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. Loro, and it happened to him in the city of Marechal Candido, which is in Brazil, and at that time, in 2001, Mr. Loro was still only a young man. And today, I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me at dawn when a strange creature, which to me was a werewolf, came to get something from my ranch, and this monster almost caused a tragedy. And it all starts like this. At that time, I was a teenager, and I lived with my parents in a rural area of my city, but I led a normal life, and sometimes helped my father in the delivery service he did in his truck, and also, I studied at school at night. But what happened at a certain time was that almost every day, a wanderer began to pass by my house, and this guy always carried a bag on his back, so I noticed that he would appear, sometimes at night, and during the day too, always walked towards a place where there was a vacant lot, and this stranger would disappear into this place, which was a dark thicket, and for me, he slept somewhere in the woods at night, because he went into the woods at night, and he would only appear in the daytime. Coming out of the woods. What happened once, however, was that my friends called me to pick mangoes in a field near our village, but I didn't go, and I stayed at home, because I had to do some work for my ranch. Then my friends went to the orchard. But as soon as almost 3 hours had passed, my friends came home and called me to give me some mangoes that they had picked. But the fact is that my friends had a strange bag with them, and they said that they had found that bag hidden in a mango tree that they had climbed. Well, these friends of mine used the bag to bring back more mangoes, but there were also some clothes in it, and strangely enough, some butcher's bones, and a bag of salt in a jar. At that moment, I remembered that wanderer who sometimes passed by my house, and I thought that this bag was his. So I told my colleagues to leave the bag with me, because I knew who owned it. So I ended up taking the bag, and I left it in the trunks of a tree in my backyard, so that when this wanderer came by, I would give it to him. But after all that, I went to school, and came home very late, and after a while I went to sleep. Anyway, at around 3 in the morning, I started to hear my dogs barking in the yard, and they were very nervous about something. Well, my 2 dogs were big and brave, and I doubted that any animal or person would have the courage to enter my property. Even so, I got out of bed and looked out of the window, but what I saw was that my dogs were in the backyard of my house, around the tree where I had hidden the wanderer's bag, and my animals were barking very angrily at something that was hidden up there. But as there was a lot of foliage on the branches of that tree, and I was far away, I couldn't see what was there on its trunks. Anyway, I went out of my room and got a piece of wood and went into my backyard and hid a good distance away from the tree to see what was going on. While I was looking around, I suddenly saw some branches swaying and heard the sound of something falling from the tree, at which point I saw that it was the walker's bag, which I had left in the tree, that had fallen to the ground. I immediately thought that it was the walker who was up in the tree, as the branches were still moving, but my dogs kept barking at whatever was hidden in the tree. But it didn't take long, and I heard another noise of branches breaking, and suddenly, a black figure fell from the tree, and it was huge, and it seemed to be some kind of dangerous animal. This beast, it seemed to be some kind of dog-like animal, or a strange monkey. But in order not to be attacked by the dogs, it got up quickly from the ground, and stood on all fours, and in an attack position, my dogs moved away from the animal. Then this beast grabbed the bag with its mouth, and it started to run with a limp, and perhaps it was injured because of the fall it had taken from the tree, and even so, my 2 dogs went after this beast. I took advantage of this and followed this creature at a distance, because I thought it might be a wolf, given the way it ran. But what happened was that this invading animal got close to the fence of the house and tried to get through, but the bag was stuck in the barbed wires, and this animal couldn't get through at all with that bag in its mouth. But while this creature couldn't get through the wires of the fence, the dog started fighting with this beast, and I went up to it to beat it up a bit. But when I got close to that animal, I noticed that it was bigger than I thought. And also my dogs, they started to get beaten up by this strange beast. I got scared, because this creature was very violent in this fight, so I hid behind a tree, so that this animal wouldn't see me, and I started to see what this creature was, and it wasn't any kind of animal that I had ever seen, because it was a very strange creature. At that moment, my legs stopped in fear at seeing what this creature looked like, because I saw that its eyes were lit up like lights, and that was really terrifying. The fact is that, after the dogs had been beaten by this creature, they kept barking at this beast from a distance, and I was hiding behind the tree, afraid that this animal would see me, and the bag was lying on the ground. At that moment, this creature started coughing, and it seemed to get sick, and to unbalance itself, and the strange thing is that this beast gave up on taking the bag, and quickly, it went under the barbed wire fence, and left my ranch. But then something happened. As the creature was close to the fence, that beast did something impossible. It crouched down on the ground, and tried to take the bag with its claws. I was amazed by the action of this animal, and I was frightened by it, because it was an animal with abnormal intelligence. But the creature didn't manage to take the bag, but at that time, the animal became ill again. However, to my surprise, the invading beast started moaning in pain and rolling on the ground. I took advantage of this and came out from behind the tree to see the beast, but at that moment, I looked at the creature again, and even though it was staggering, it stood up like a man, balancing on two legs. I didn't understand why the werewolf was running away. I took advantage of this moment, and I didn't wait. I took advantage of the fact that the werewolf was outside the fence of my house, and I ran to my house and locked the door. But anyway, I kept looking at the fence of my yard, and that werewolf had already disappeared. Well, at that point it was already 4 o'clock in the morning, and even so, I stayed up until dawn, afraid that the werewolf would come back and try to attack me again. But as soon as dawn broke, I went to walk around my yard, and I saw the bag that the werewolf had tried to take, right there in my yard, so I threw that bag in the vacant lot near my house, so that the werewolf wouldn't come back to my ranch. Then I went back to doing my daily chores at home. But at the end of the afternoon, I was in my backyard as usual, and that's when I saw that wanderer again, walking along a path in the vacant lot next to the house, and I stayed hidden watching him. But this suspect didn't see me, and to my surprise, the wanderer came close to the bag, and he stood there looking at the bag. This strange guy looked away, then he saw me and started to disguise himself. Then he turned back with a frightened look, and this guy started to walk with a limp on one leg, and disappeared into the woods, and didn't take his bag. I don't know what came over him, but to my surprise, the next day, I didn't see that bag on the ground anymore, and for me, it was the wanderer who came back hiding and took the bag. But after that day, I never saw the guy again in my life, and the bag could only be the werewolf's for sure, because it had clothes and pieces of meat with bones, and salt inside the backpack, and the werewolf came after that backpack, and found it in my yard hidden in the tree. And at the time this creature was fighting with my dogs, he coughed, because the werewolf was coming back in the form of a man, and that was my luck, that this beast escaped. And you, what did you think of this story? Did this walker have something with the werewolf, or did he really become that animal, and by the smell found his bag on top of my tree? At least for me, everything connects, because this guy was limping on his legs, and the werewolf, when he fell from the tree, also limped. And another thing I admired about the werewolf was his intelligence to try to get his bag with his claws. And that was my account that I spent with the werewolf. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you like the story, subscribe to the Fear Zone channel and leave your like until the next real werewolf story. Fear Zone channel. Good evening everyone, and now we go to the story of today, which is Mr. Mariano, and this happened to him in the city of Franca, which is in the state of Sao Paulo, and at that time, which was the year 2001, Mr. Mariano was 29 years old. And today, I will tell my werewolf story, in which I spent the greatest danger with this creature, and to start, I live in a village near the rural area of the city, and in this region has some farms and ranches, but I work in a company on the other side of town, where my shift is until 1 o'clock in the morning. But apart from all that, is that it occurred that a certain night, I was leaving my job on the company bus, and arrived in my neighborhood, the point where I got off, around 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, I started walking down a dirt road, where my house was only about 10 minutes walk, but the place was full of bushes next to the road, and at that time it was very dark vegetation. However, I was getting close to home, I saw a walker, who I knew, and he came out of the bush, and the walker was looking from the side, kind of looking worried about something, and when I was passing by him, this guy called me, and came to talk to me, and what this street dweller told me, was that about 15 minutes ago, this walker was passing near a farm, and it was then, that out of nowhere, he saw a kind of strange dog, which was inside this property, and this beast began to follow him. As he passed near this farm, but as it had a screen of iron fence in this farm, the animal only followed inside the property, because he could not pass through the fence. But then the walker found this animal strange, because he didn't bark. This guy was curious, so he went to the fence to get a better look at this animal. As soon as he got closer to the creature, this homeless man was frightened by the appearance of this animal, and its size, but such a beast, but this guy strangely the animal, because this beast walked with his head down, so that this walker could not see his face right, and when such a dog was coming closer to him, this walker pretended to pick up a stone on the ground, to throw this dog. At this moment, the beast raised his head, and looked nervously at the walker, then this creature came running to attack him, but the animal came close to the fence, but there was no way for this beast to pass through the iron screen fence, but that creature stood up, balancing on 2 legs, and the street dweller was frightened, for the wanderer, this creature was a werewolf, because he was a beast very similar to a dog, with big pointed ears, and his body was almost like a man, but had a black coat, and he also said that the eyes of this beast had a yellow glow, which were like lights on. Well, the walker seeing this werewolf in front of him, he got scared, and started running to get out of the place, because this creature was looking over the screen, and then this werewolf started trying to climb up through this iron screen to jump to catch him. Then the werewolf started to try to climb up this iron screen to jump up and catch him, and he started to walk near my house, and he saw this werewolf again, walking on all fours, about 30 meters away from him, and this man hid himself with fear in the bushes, and then I appeared on the street. I doubted that this story was true, and I didn't believe this guy very much, but anyway, when I got home, I went to the kitchen, and made a quick snack, and then I stayed in the living room watching TV, but sometimes, I even looked at the window, to try to see if it was true from that street dweller, that there would be a werewolf around, but I couldn't see anything, not even around the woods of my property. As soon as some time passed, I started to sleep in the living room, but soon I woke up with the noise of an ugly fight of my dogs, and I got scared, so I thought, it could even be a bandit, or a ferocious animal. Well, I was looking through the window and I saw something very strange in my backyard, because I had 2 dogs, and my bigger dog was on top of a huge black creature, and I didn't know what it was, but to my surprise, in this fight, I realized that this invading animal had man-like arms, and he was holding the neck of my bigger dog so that it wouldn't get bitten, and it was no use, because my other dog was biting the legs of this animal. I found this movement of the beast strange. However, this animal managed to roll fighting with my dogs on the ground, but soon he escaped from my dogs, and that he ran to my wooden fence in my backyard on 4 legs, but my dogs followed him and managed to surround him near the fence. But to my amazement, this beast stood upright, balancing on only 2 legs, and jumped over the fence, and this creature then disappeared into the woods. And to me, this beast was a werewolf, and for sure, it was the same animal that I Anderilho saw inside the farm, because besides looking like a black dog, it stood upright, and its eyes were lit like lights. But the biggest problem was that I didn't have a firearm in the house, so I took a wooden lath to defend myself in case this werewolf tried to enter my house. Well, then, my wife came over, scared with the noises that she heard, and I told her that there was a werewolf in our yard fighting with the dogs, and we were very afraid that this beast could come back. After that, I didn't sleep anymore, and stayed up the rest of the night just watching to see if that beast was coming back or not, but soon dawn came, and I didn't see the creature. The fact is that when dawn came, I went to buy bread at the grocery store, but before that I stopped by the pharmacy, where a cousin of mine worked. So I started talking with my relative about what I had seen at dawn, and that there was a werewolf walking in the neighborhood. I do not know if my relative believed me or not, but what happened is that soon came a strange guy in the pharmacy. He was with a cloth wrapped around his arm, and with scratch marks on his face and neck, and my cousin was attending this injured man, and I saw that this guy could have been bitten by some dog, the type of bruise he had suffered on the body. Anyway, after I went to buy bread at the grocery store, and on my way back, I thought better of it, and that wounded guy, who came into the pharmacy, could be the werewolf that appeared in my yard, and that fought with my dogs. But time went by, and the strange guy, who was bitten by the dogs, I haven't seen again in my village until today, and even so, being the werewolf or not, I started to go by car to my work, not to bump into this werewolf at dawn, and also, now I have a gun stored at home, to defend myself from any kind of danger, but fortunately, I haven't seen another werewolf like that. But these creatures of the night do exist, and we have to be careful so that we don't run into these werewolves. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like the story, subscribe to the channel. Until the next horror story. Fear Zone Channel, your channel of terror. Good evening everyone, and now we come to today's story, which is of Mr. Jackson, and this happened to him in the town of North Little Rock, which is in the state of Arkansas, and at that time, which was in the year 2007, Mr. Jackson was 43 years old. But before I start the story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like, and activate the notification bell to receive more werewolf videos, and now let's get to today's story. And what I am going to tell you is what happened to me some years ago, because on a certain night, a werewolf managed to trick me, and for sure, it was that strange man that I helped that turned into this creature. And to start my story, I am a truck driver to this day, and I like my profession very much, and also, I know many stories that truck drivers that have passed through these roads tell, and they are very scary stories, until one day I passed through something supernatural. Well, at that time, which was a few years ago, I was traveling with a load of wood to deliver it to a neighboring town in a lumber mill, and after a few hours on the road, driving with my truck, I arrived at this lumber mill. Soon after, the workers of this company began to unload the lumber from the body of my vehicle. Then the hours passed, and my truck was completely unloaded around 7 o'clock in the evening, and after the work was finished, one of the workers asked me if I could take it to his town, which would take more or less, almost 2 hours of travel. Since it was my way, and I was going to pass through this town, so I gave this guy a ride, and we started traveling together, and I was going back to my house. After almost an hour of traveling, I saw that this man slept in the seat of my truck, and it could only be exhaustion because he had loaded several heavy loads of wood all afternoon. But at a certain part of the road, I stopped my truck and entered a supermarket to get some beers, and I lingered there for a while because I had dinner there as well. After I had done all this, I went back to the truck, but the man to whom I had given a ride was still sleeping in the cabin of my truck, so I left him resting and would only wake him up when we arrived in his town. Meanwhile, I got on the road and drove the truck on the road, and after a while, suddenly the man who was sleeping in the seat of my vehicle started coughing strangely, and out of nowhere, this guy vomited, and then he woke up very scared and told me to stop the truck quickly. I didn't understand anything because we were passing through a place where there was a forest by the side of the road, and this man wanted to get out of the truck right there in that deserted area, and it was close to midnight. Well, I ended up stopping the truck to see what was happening to this man, but he started having some kind of epileptic seizure, and I was terrified because to me this man could die. But something strange was happening to this man because his body was creaking as if his bones were making noise. I wanted to take this man somewhere habitable so that someone would attend to him. But what happened is that he got a little better and he was back to normal, but then this guy opened the door of the cab of my truck and he got out of the vehicle, and by the light of the headlight, I saw that this guy was staggering and went into the forest. Even though I was scared, I got out of the truck and went after this guy, and as soon as I entered the forest by the side of the road, I saw this man's clothes lying on the ground, and he was moaning a lot and rolling on the ground, as if he felt a lot of pain in his body, but I was amazed, and I didn't approach this guy because he was naked and without clothes. And suddenly, this man began to speak with difficulty and in a strange voice for me to leave and to get away from him quickly, at which point I was confused what to do because he seemed to be having a bad time. The fact is that this guy stopped moaning, and with that I went to see him more closely, but suddenly this man got up from the ground. At that time I got scared with what I saw because that guy was all hairy and his eyes had a bright glow that left me with a lot of fear, but I did not wait for that to attack me and started running to the cab of my truck. As soon as I got to the vehicle, I got in the cab and closed the doors. Then what I did was I started the truck to get out of that place. But this creature came out of the bushes, and strangely enough it was standing like a man, but it looked like a big black dog because it had ears and mouth like a dog, and had arms like a man's, with hands and fingers, but his legs looked a little crooked, and he was something very bizarre, and for sure this monster was dangerous too. But as I looked and noticed this animal through the window of the truck door, to me it was a werewolf. But this creature crouched down and stood on four legs like a dog, and came running towards my truck as I was driving away with my vehicle. That werewolf stood on the door side of my vehicle, and tried to open the door handle, and he was beating furiously on the door, but luckily for me, the door was locked, and he didn't get anything. I finally got on the road with my truck and got out of there fast, and I was thinking about this werewolf, and how lucky I was not to be attacked by him, because he seemed to be a very violent beast, and I would be very bad off if he got me when I went into the woods after him. The thing is, I was driving home scared, and after an hour, I got home, and I never thought that someday I might even see a werewolf like that in the woods near the tracks. The fact is, when I arrived at my residence, I saw that the bag of the suspect who turned werewolf was inside my truck, and I ended up opening this bag, and what was there inside the bag was some pieces of raw meat and large bones, which seemed to be rest of bones from some butcher shop, so I understood why the werewolf tried to open the door of my truck. Maybe he wanted to get his meat that was inside the bag. I don't know, but the way this creature was growling in rage at my vehicle door, maybe he wanted to attack me too. After all this, a few weeks went by. I went back to make another delivery of wood to that sawmill where the man who turned into a werewolf worked, and arriving at the lumber company, the workers there told me that the guy I gave a ride the other day, he never showed up at the lumber mill to unload trucks again. Well, I said nothing of what happened to me that night, and the guy who became a werewolf I kept this secret with me because as the guy disappeared suddenly and was never heard from again, you will never know what happened to him that night. And also, I will never forget that day that I came across the werewolf in front of me. But even today, sometimes when I travel by truck on the roads, I look at the forests nearby, and I know that there might be a werewolf hiding in those woods. And I felt deceived and betrayed by the werewolf. Thank you all very much for watching my video, and if you like the story, leave your like, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the Fear Zone channel to receive more werewolf horror stories.